Hey everybody, it's Gene Marks again, and thanks so much for coming back and joining us on the Hartford Small Biz Ahead Podcast. We are super happy to have you here. I'm also super happy to have Chris Dreyer here. Chris is the CEO of Rankings.io and the author of Niching Up, the narrower the market, the bigger the prize. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Gene, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you here. By the way, where are we speaking to you from? Where are you?
I'm in Marion, Illinois, so at the bottom of Illinois.
Very good. Right in the beginning of the Midwest, I guess. You born and raised there?
Yes, sir. Yeah. DeSoto, Illinois. I moved away to North Tampa, and they drew me back. Family drew me back.
Once you try to get out, they always drive you back in, don't you? Right? Well, I'm happy to have you here. Your book is great and very, very relevant to our audience and to me as well. I was telling you, before we started recording, how I run my own business and always looking to expand my marketing to certain niches in the markets that we go to. So tell me a little bit about Niching Up. Tell me about the book, when you published it, what brought you to write it.
Geez, I wrote it. When did it publish? About October last year, something like that. I'm not sure exactly. The reason I wrote it is I just had something to say. I experienced everything I talk about. It wasn't like I went through the ups and downs. And I don't have this ascension to where there's a course and then there's coaching. I just had something to say. I wanted to write a book, and I could speak very strongly about this because I had so much experience. I went through a lot of iterations in my entrepreneurial journey.
Right.
The one that I focus on primarily in the book is my agency and how I went from a legal agency that kind of did everything to really focusing in on personal injury attorneys.
So tell me, what is the book about?
The book's about the pros and cons of niching. And so many people, when they think of niching, they think of niching down. And I think of like a scarcity mindset of like what you're giving up. And I'm trying to have a little divergent thinking here and niching up from an abundance perspective, because in many situations, it allows for opportunity, and opportunity in business is profit. We run a business to make profit. Otherwise, it's a hobby or a nonprofit. And there's a lot of advantages of niching. Perception allows you to raise your prices, increases your ability to close because of your copywriting and knowing your avatar, maximizes your marketing spend. You know where your consumers congregate. There's many, many advantages that are talked about. And the main one that's always thrown out there is you reduce your TAM, your total addressable market.
Right.
And I would say in most cases, niching and focus actually is more advantageous than niching being a disadvantage.
I mean, when you talk about niching, Chris, define it for me.
In one word, I would say focus.
Okay.
You are focusing. Malcolm Gladwell talks about, in order to become an expert, you need to have 10,000 hours in a discipline. And if you're doing everything, it's going to take you many, many years to become an expert in any respective area. But if you focus all your time and energy on one thing, then you can become an expert. You can specialize and niche. That's what niching's about. It allows you to create value at a much deeper level. And you see this in everyday life. It's a way to stand out in the crowded space. And we can go super deep and happy to answer any questions you have on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest problem or the biggest pushback I bet you would get to the whole concept of niching is that we all as business owners sort of want to, have our cake and eat it too, Mm-hmm. So we want to apply, we want to sell to as many people as possible. We don't want to, turn down any opportunities that come across our door. And, you would, by niching, you are doing just that, aren't you? I mean, you're probably turning away business so that you can stay focused on what, you do best. And I'm wondering, what do you say to people that say like, oh, that hurts because we don't want to turn business away?
I would say to look at it from a long-term perspective. From a short-term orientation, yes, you're probably turning away money, but is it profit? And because there's a lot that goes into becoming profitable from an organization. consistency, productization, having the right pricing structure, being able to provide value. That's what people don't talk about. It's hard to generate a profit. And the way I look at it is, if you're saying no, they may not be the right fit for you, but they're the right fit for someone. In most cases, you can send out a referral and even get paid for the referral, and that's straight, pure net profit margin. But what happens is it lends itself to trust from that consumer. That individual trusts you because you turned down money that they were willing to give you, but also allows you to establish reciprocity through relationships, through referrals. Right. Everyone talks about they love referrals. They're easier to close. Everyone wants referrals. But the best way to get a referral is to give a referral.
Right.
So that's what you have to think about.
When I look at my own business, Chris, I have 10 employees and we sell CRM software, customer relationship management software, right? And it's a niche. I mean, there's a lot of software products, business software products that are out there that we could also be selling. And I often get, requests from people saying, "Hey, Gene, can you help us with this accounting software? Can you help us with this, with this HR platform?" And I'm always like, "No, it's just we only focus on CRM." And sometimes I do shake my head, saying "Oh man, I hate passing up an opportunity," because it's hard to say no. What advice do you have for business owners like myself that sometimes just has to say no to stay focused?
I would say look at it from a long-term perspective and how you're focused in and creating the best expertise on CRM specialization.
Right.
And you're the person when they think of in that crowded space. You're not the jack of all trades. You're the master of one. The one thing that I will say, at some point, there may be a scenario where you do need to open up your TAM. Or you do need to consider other services. But at that point, you'll be capitalized very well and you'll have consistent lead flow for the other thing. And you'll discover that from all the no's that you've turned down in the past.
Would your advice be for companies like mine that want to open up? I mean, I shouldn't open up a candy store, right? I mean, I should be leveraging on what we've already done in the past, correct?
Yeah, Tony Robbins says one of my favorite quotes by him is don't fall in love with your product or service, which is a little contradictory to the niching. Fall in love with helping your client.
Yeah.
So the candy store, if you're a CRM expert, I don't know how you could tie that in. Maybe you could get creative and figure out how to tie that in.
Yeah.
But what is it that they also need? That would probably be next because you're just powering that flywheel. You're creating more value in your respective market as opposed to just completely shifting to another industry or specialization. The thing that a lot of people undervalue is relationship equity.
Right.
Einstein has this quote where he says the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest. And everyone thinks of finances. You think of stocks, you think of dividends. But there's relationship equity because you develop trust in this industry. They will, once you develop so much trust because of the value you provide, they're going to buy other things. And you can move up the ladder. You can move upstream to the bigger and bigger markets. Even myself, being focused on personal injury attorneys, I've talked to Mike Papantonio. I've talked to Kyle Backus. I've talked to the biggest people in the PI space. That took time. Do I know the criminal defense attorneys at the top? I do not.
Right.
They don't know who I am. I'd have to start at the bottom of that ladder and then move up. And I can move up maybe a little faster because of my relationships in PI and legal, but it would still be a challenge.
Got it. So you mentioned about, where you've come from. So right now you grew up in, as an agency in the law industry, but now you're focusing on personal injury marketing. Mm-hmm. That's your niche. Tell us how you arrived at that.
Good question. About 7 years in was getting more data focused.
Okay.
The larger your business becomes, the more emphasis there'll be on data to make decisions. At the very beginning of the business, you've got your team of 7 and you can have one meeting. Everyone's on the one meeting and You know kind of what's going on because they're all right there, and you can make decisions, right? You don't have a lot of clients because I can think of those. At some point, it's impossible to do that. And you have to
Mm-hmm.
make database decisions. And we ran an analysis based upon our revenue and client concentration. So we found that 70% of our revenue was from less than 40% of our clientele, which was personal injury law firms. Very clear decision that, hey, we need to focus on PI. They're paying us the most money. They're in the most demand or most need of advertising services, marketing services. That's how we came about that. I think there's a lot of misinformation out in the space about when to niche and how to niche.
Right.
A lot of coaches and mentors, they'll say, you need to niche. And they know the advantages of it. And I agree. But the question is when.
Right.
And I lean towards you have to have all these experiences before you determine what you have, where you can get a profit, where you have a passion and purpose.
Right.
You have to have these experiences first. So you can't niche out of the gate in most scenarios. And there's a book by David Epstein called Range. And in his book, he talks about Nadal, the famous tennis player.
Mm-hmm.
And his parents put him in all kinds of sports, basketball, baseball, tennis. I don't know the sports, but a bunch of them. And he excelled at tennis. And he's the superstar he is today. But imagine if his parents was like, we're just going to put him in basketball.
Right.
Maybe he would have been great. It's very unlikely that he would have been a superstar.
Right.
But because he had all these experiences, he identified the opportunity. So that's what I'm saying as a business owner. It's like maybe you do need to go a little broader in the beginning or work for someone else that gets these experiences. And
sure, to where you figure out where your expertise is and where you really want to focus on. All right, so let's keep talking about you here. So you've been focusing on personal injury, as your niche as it is, right? So you might decide to continue to grow that, or you might decide to explore other niches. And let's assume that you're like, you've identified a market opportunity maybe with divorce attorneys, that, and you say, you know what, that would be another niche to get into. So some questions on that. Like, would you say you did that just hypothetically? Would you're branded as a personal injury specialist, your agency, would you keep that divorce, if you decided to go into the divorce law niche under your same brand, or would you create a different brand that is specifically with that, with that niche? Do you follow what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're talking about. So I have a mentor. I have a coach. His name's Bobby Castro. He had $1 billion exit, $700 million in real estate. And I went through this exact scenario recently with him. And what he says, and which I think is true, is every niche needs to think that they're the only one, but that doesn't mean that you only serve them. Well, how do you do that? You could have separate sites where you do that. Now, for me, even though I own an 8-figure agency, in the agency space is very saturated, and I would say I'm undercapitalized. I'm not. I've bootstrapped everything. So for me, I would make a more speak to legal on the homepage, and then have dedicated landing pages for each of these niches. But then, how would I get in front of them? My best tactic, giving away what I do, is through a podcast. So I have a personal injury podcast. My website, which is going to be rebranded soon, is going to be just legal. And if I wanted to go after divorce, I could start a divorce podcast. I could do some divorce Facebook ads that go to just that landing page. And you see the big organizations like Scorpion. Yeah. Scorpion's a $250 million agency with 400 sales reps. Yeah. They're a generalist agency. But in the space, I think of them like a legal agency.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. I mean, honestly, when I talk to you and I think of you, I mean, your brand is you, so, and rankings.io. I mean, that's how people kind of know you. It's when you think about for, most businesses, particularly smaller businesses that want to go into a different type of niche, starting it up from scratch without leveraging what they've already built seems like you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. You know what I mean?
I completely agree. For that scenario, you said, would you make a separate website? Well, if I do that, I have no authority for SEO. I have,
Yeah,
I got to build the website. That
yeah,
might be 20, 30 grand in 6 months worth of work. And we all went through the design processes, right?
right, right.
And then, there's just a lot of components where I already got this website. How about I just write a blog on divorce marketing? I think we actually do rank number one for that. Divorce lawyer SEO, probably
Right.
number one. But that's kind of the approach, is I would use your existing assets.
Yeah, it just seems, and plus, people aren't idiots nowadays. I mean, they can pretty much figure out that even if you started up a whole new website that focused on divorce law, it wouldn't take long to put two and two together and say, well, that's the same guy from rankings. So
Yeah, this is a really good question, because it's something that I didn't cover in the book, and it all comes down to brand architecture. It's like,
right,
so do you want a branded house or a house of brands?
right.
And so do you want multiple entities all over the place to kind of decentralize, or do you want one superpower? And yeah.
And I'm only saying that because your brand is you, and this applies to all of us, in the audience right now that are talking to you or listening to you. The brand is us and our businesses, and so you've got a relationship with not only your clients, but if people look at what you've done, and then you decide to go into another niche. I think the inference is like, hey, this guy he crushed it in personal injury, so he clearly knows what he's doing there. So yeah, I want to match up with this guy, but my need is for divorce. So I'm happy to be with a guy that's at that kind of track record. So that, to me, it makes more sense. Okay, I asked you, I took this leap saying, like, say you identified divorce law as a niche you wanted to go into, but let's backtrack back over there and say, like, if you were looking for another niche to go into, Chris, like, how do you look for that? I mean, I'm assuming you're looking all the time. I mean, I know you specialize in personal injury, but like anybody who wants growth or more challenges, you're probably thinking like, hey, man, what's another kind of related niche that I can get into? How do you go about finding that? Or what's your thought process for maybe identifying an opportunity?
For me, I'll take a couple approaches here.
Okay.
The first thing is I go directly to my CRM. I'm using Pipedrive. Wish I was on HubSpot. That's a different story.
Yep.
I would go there and see the lost deals that weren't PI. How many were family law? How many were criminal defense? There's a lot of opportunity there. I'm already getting those in. Let me just accept those, right? We turned those down in the past and referred them for that reciprocity, but maybe I want to take that now. That's the first place I would look. The second thing that I would do.
I'm going to interrupt you. I have to interrupt here because as somebody who sells CRM software, I mean, man, you are preaching to the choir. I mean, my best clients, when they're going after opportunities, if they don't get the opportunities, they always complete those opportunities as a lost deal or a lost sale. And they always put in some type of an explanation, usually, in a field, why they lost it. Maybe the price was too high, but more importantly, who they lost it to, what competitor. And I wanted to just reemphasize what you just said, that like, if you're listening or watching this and you've got a CRM system and you want to create other niches for yourself, you need to make sure that you are tracking where you're losing work so that you can go back into history and do a postmortem and say like, well, I'm losing a lot to that product or that competitor. Maybe there's an opportunity there for me to go after. So I'm glad you brought that up because it's super important. You said there's go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, those predefined loss reasons too that fit, so that way you can sort them and analyze the data based upon
not too
your
hard
volume.
to do. But anyway, you will probably not want to lose that deal, or be happy to talk about losing that deal. So you want to think about it, but you should be tracking that because the good, the bad, even bad news can still turn into potential future opportunities. You were saying there was other ways to identify opportunities or identify niches.
Another great opportunity is to use your clients or your podcast as a feedback loop.
Right.
You're talking to, so I love a podcast. I love StreamYard and these types of things because we have these intimate conversations and we get to learn. So many people talk about the marketing and the social media and the distribution, but it's a feedback loop. So I get to know what's maybe a parallel niche to PI that I could develop a relationship with. Would it be chiropractors to set up referral relationships? Would it be doctors? Would it be the mass tort space.
Sure.
What are the parallels so that they could easily kind of transition into, and just use your podcast or your client base as a feedback loop.
It's great. That is great advice. This conversation is only so timely because, again, I say we sell CRM, we sell other business applications in our business, and we get feedback from our clients all the time. They get frustrated, say, with Gmail or Google or getting support and whatever. And I was just having a conversation with one of my project managers this morning about, like, hey, Gene, we ought to offer services that support Google Ads, Gmail, Google Apps. It's not something that we do, but we're just getting that feedback from our clients right now. Now, it's anecdotal, so I guess what you're saying is you probably want to quantify that more, maybe doing formal surveys to your client base.
Yes. Yeah. Formal surveys. Look, the Big Mac was made by a franchisee for McDonald's. Like, look at what that did for them. It's like, survey your clients. What do they want? Are you selling just SEO like me and they want OTT? They want social media. If they're wanting it, there's your buyers. That's a pretty easy transition. You got immediate revenue coming in versus the capital and the lag and all that time that you could waste for discovery.
Right. Yeah, it's absolutely something. I mean, your advice is right on, and that was exactly what I was talking about with Michael, my project manager, this morning about doing a similar type of outreach to our client base and asking if those are the kinds of services that they would want. Final question for you, Chris. I'm going to let you go. This is great stuff. You talk about marketing to niches. I'm assuming though that it's tough to build a sustainable business, a livelihood on just one niche, right? I mean, to me, like, the impression I get is that most people would probably want to be specializing in more than that, 2, 3, something like that. Does that make sense to you, or is that something you recommend to other business owners?
There's a good book called Ready, Fire, Aim by Michael Masterson. And it's a little older now, so the ranges may be different, but I think the principles are very sound. From 0 to $1 million, and again, I know there's all levels of growth for businesses.
Sure.
I'm restating what he's saying.
Sure.
From 0 to $1 million, it's you need to figure out product market fit. From 1 to 10 million, it's either one service and multiple channels to get leads from it.
Yeah.
Or multiple services and one really powerful channel. To get above 10 million, to get into 8 figures, it's typically multiple channels, multiple services. Amazon at the beginning sold books.
Yep.
Now look at everything they sell.
Yep.
You have to have more things to sell because you will cap out a TAM.
Yeah. Particularly if you want to grow, obviously. That makes complete sense. I've been speaking with Chris Dreyer. Chris is the CEO of Rankings.io. He is the author of Niching Up: The Narrower the Market, the Bigger the Prize. Chris, you also host a podcast, Personal Injury Mastermind. I'm assuming we can find that on all the great podcast platforms.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And tell me about the Dreyer Sheet newsletter very quickly.
Play on words. My marketing team had a lot of fun with that. So the Dreyer Sheet, because I always say it's Chris Dreyer, dryer washer.
It's cute.
It's just it's more like a curation based newsletter. So anything I'm involved in, any guest appearances, this show, I featured on the Dreyer Sheet.
Great. All right, that's great. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. It was a great conversation. I hope people that are watching and listening to this are they get some ideas for creating new niches for their businesses and how to capitalize on them. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Everybody, you've been watching and listening to Small Biz Ahead podcast from the Hartford. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Gene Marks. We will be back again soon with another episode talking to another smart entrepreneur like Chris with some advice to help you run your business. We will see you again. Take care.